Do you find yourself in the same argument and conflict over and over again with the same person all the time? This webinar will address what's most likely the fuel behind these arguments that repeat and repeat. Hello, I'm Troy Faddis, Clinical Director for Legacy Outdoor Ventures.
And I'm Maddy Liebing, a Clinical Director for Juniper Canyon Recovery Center for Women.
And today we're going to do a webinar that talks about attachment. And what is attachment styles? What's a little bit about attachment theory? And get to know a little bit about, help you get to know a little bit about your attachment history. So attachment theory really started with Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. They're the father and grandfather and grandmother of what's now called attachment theory. And after World War II, the research really continued, and we started to see outcomes of using an approach that is now referred to as emotionally focused therapy. And there's emotionally focused therapy for couples, and there's emotionally focused therapy for families. And both are very empirically based, proven approaches that show us that it's effective in helping us change these patterns that we're into. Because most likely the patterns we're in, it's really not about the things we're arguing or fighting about, but it's the process and the reasons, the unmet needs that we have that we're in these arguments in the first place. So Bowlby and Ainsworth set out to understand what these are and why it's such an innate need for each of us. And an example of some of their outcome research was from World War II. After the war, as you probably have seen in reading or watching the movie, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where the children are sent to the country to live with relatives and sometimes with strangers because they were safe there or safer there than they were in the city, where the city was being bombed nightly. And even though it was a physical safety thing, they found that after the war that most of the children that stayed in London with their parents were more adjusted. They adjusted more quickly back to life than those who were away, showing the power of being able to be with the person that you feel safest with, even if you're in danger, knowing that your proximity to that person gives you a sense of safety and soothing, and that matters. And I think we can see that now today during this COVID-19 as we all isolate, and sometimes we're with the people that we find most secure, sometimes we're not. And that's causing a lot of issues for all of us as we're trying to connect and stay connected. And that's where Bowlby and Ainsworth and now Sue Johnson has been helping us understand the importance of having a secure or insecure attachment style. I like this graphic. I think it helps us see the visualization of the different types of attachment styles that we can get into. And here on the scale, we have a high proximity and we have low proximity. And that's not just physical proximity, but it's also emotional and mental proximity. We all carry important figures in our minds. And when we have them close to us or mentally close to us, it gives us a sense of safety, and we feel like we can explore the world, even though it may be unfair, it may be cruel at times. We know that that person or persons has our back, and that gives us the security to go out and take risk and try new things. And we also have an anxiety factor, and particularly an anxiety about being abandoned. And when we're high in that level, we're over here in these quadrants. And when we're low, we're over over here. So we all, at times, hope to have a what we call a secure attachment style, where we're low on fear of being abandoned, but we're high on having that figure in our lives, and that's when we feel most secure. Often, like when we're at our very best, and a lot of the times, especially as stress and conflict occurs with some of our most important people, we can have a high anxiety of them leaving, but they're still there. And our attachment style is more like Lucy. And at times, we have a low anxiety and a low desire to be with people. And we're more like Schroeder, where we're more withdrawn or avoidant. And sometimes we're in the middle. We're like Charlie Brown, but we're really fearful both of abandonment and we're prone to that anxiety of not having people close to us. And so we move between these and even in a secure way often.
Yeah, I think when I think about my one of the places that I seem to find myself a lot, especially as a parent. I'm a psychologist, but I'm also a mom and have raised 5 daughters, and I find myself in that Lucy quadrant quite a bit, where I would have some pretty high anxiety and worry about them, and want to be as close to them as possible. And so I would find myself doing things like, well, what parents do a lot of times is kind of nagging, just saying, have you got your homework done? Get up, it's time to go to school. Did you do your laundry and clean your room and all that kind of stuff? And so I found myself as being definitely a pursuer and pursuing a relationship with my daughters. And not all the time, but sometimes they would be on the Schroeder end of things, where they were just going, they were just disconnecting. They were definitely avoidant and or just avoiding my pursuing, basically. And so then we get in this chase game, where I'm chasing, they're hiding, and we're just kind of going back and forth, and it becomes a really negative cycle. And then if things got really bad, I would find myself in the Charlie Brown place, where I'm just really, really anxious and just feeling really disconnected at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what, I would like to have been able to do at that time is to be able to see this pattern and how this pattern is playing out in our relationship, and then be able to, kind of step back enough to see it and maybe look at if there's something else I'd like to do, or I want to do something different in that relationship.
Yeah. These are some of the most common, like I said, those repetitive arguments or conflicts that we have with people, is that when our attachment needs are not being met,
Right.
we tend to fall into this pattern where one of us tends to be, like Lucy, a pursuer. And for us, it's the way that we know best how to cope, how to fix it. Like we want things to be better. We want things to be different. And so we do everything within our power to do it by asking questions, maybe even being critical. But we're constantly trying to get the other person to engage, to be responsive, and for us to make movement. And it may seem surprising to some, but this person down here, we often see them as being the withdrawer or the avoiding person in the relationship. And we think that they may not care. But in reality, they do. They're being just as adaptive as the person who's pursuing. And they want the relationship to work as much. But they're afraid that if they say something, they say what they think, how they feel, put their opinion out there, that is probably going to make things worse, not better. And so they pull in to help protect the relationship.
Yeah, and I remember the story that was a perfect example of this with my daughter when she was 14, my number 3 daughter. And she got really angry with me. And she stomped out of the room and went to her bedroom and slammed the door. And I, of course, chased her. I just followed her right down the hallway, right to her door. And she slammed the door, and I said, "Let me come in. Let's talk. Let's make this better. Let's work." And we were definitely in a very tight cycle of pursuer and withdrawer at that point in time. And so I just sat down on the floor by her door, and I don't know for sure if she knew I was there, but I just sat there next to the door for like 45 minutes because I just wanted to be by her. I needed that proximity, even though she wasn't really responding to me, at that point in time. And the good news is that the next morning, I'm a psychologist, and so I would go different places to do testing and stuff. And so I had a briefcase that I would take with me all the time. And the next morning, she had never did come out, never did talk to me, but the next morning I opened up my briefcase and she had blitzed me with little notes and pictures of herself and saying, "I'm sorry, and I do love you," and, all of that kind of stuff. One of the notes that she said I kept for a really long time because it was so cute, is she said, I'm going to, I know that I'm going to have to apologize to you when I'm older. Not that I can do it now, but she didn't say that part. She says, "I just know I'm going to have to apologize when I'm older." But at least to let me know that she wanted to have some kind of contact too, but she was doing that survival. She was doing that was what she was doing. That was the only thing she knew how to do at that point in time. And we were just caught in that negative cycle.
Yeah. So Dr. Scott Woolley, he's one of the EFT trainers that I work with, and he's at Alliant University in California. And he's developed a questionnaire that helps us understand, or at least look at, what our attachment history has been like for us, help us explore if our attachment needs have been met and if our attachment needs have been unmet. So I'm going to present some of the questions that he asked in this assessment. The first one is that when you're thinking about, you can probably pick any age, but during those latency years, maybe even before and a little bit after, who did you go to for comfort?
And I think that there might be more than one person that comes to your mind as you think about that question. But my guess is that there's going to be one or two that really stand out. That there will be somebody in your life that was the person that when you were when you were struggling, when you were hurt, that you went to be comforted. Mine was my mom. I've had other people too that I felt close to, but the first name that came to my mind was my mom. And when I was really young, I knew that no matter what, she had my back. And I remember when I was only like 5 or 6 years old, and I fell on the sidewalk and scrubbed up my knee. And I went to her, and she gathered me up, she hugged me, she cleaned the wound, she wiped it out, and then even making it better is she blamed the sidewalk for the accident and said, that sidewalk shouldn't have done that to you. And I go, yes, bad sidewalk, and it was just very warm and soothing and comforting for her to take my side, between me and a sidewalk, for sure. I think as you think about that person, you can think of memories of when you had that comfort and that consistency and that caring and that knowing that she was, or him or her was there for you.
And then also thinking about that person, could you always count on them? Were there times that they were available? Or question 5, were there times that this person may have betrayed you, been unavailable, and even critical, which would have been maybe a surprise or a shock to you?
A lot of times I think about the work I do a lot of times with people who are adult children of alcoholics, or their parents were also adult children of alcoholics. And one of the things that happens for them is that their parent can be really supportive and present and effective, and at times, and then sometimes they're just not. because of the addiction, because of the alcohol and the substances and the way that they affect the way of interacting. And so they never know for sure if that parent is going to be there for them and comfort them and, provide that secure attachment, or whether they're going to be unavailable, and or even sometimes angry or mean or critical. And that creates all sorts of attachment wounds and difficulties in developing relationships later when they try to begin to trust others, because they're not used to having that consistency. Mm-hmm. So I think in a secure attachment, in a best case scenario is that we have as much consistency as possible, and not every person is going to be always there all the time. But to the degree that we can provide that kind of attachment connection for either our partners, our spouses, our children. We're siblings.
Yeah. When you say that, I realize that I think that this is one of the main reasons people come to therapy, is that they realize that they've had this injury and it's now is impacting the ways that they interact with each other in all kinds of ways. But one of the issues is that I think that they come to therapy more because of what's going on, not why. Mm-hmm. And so they show up in the office or in a treatment program because they want to fix someone's alcohol use or substance abuse. They want to fix someone's rudeness. They want someone to validate that that it's okay for them to be aggressive, or it's okay for them to be withdrawn. And I think that that's one of the hardest parts about being a therapist is, like, it's not about me giving my opinion or my advice or trying to teach you, but it's having an experience with you where I'm here not to get stuck on the content that you're trying to share with me, although I recognize that that's why you're in pain. And that is important, but that I'm there as I'm your process consultant. And I'm trying to help you recognize, are you like Lucy and you're pursuing, trying to resolve this problem? Are you like Schroeder and you're trying to avoid? Or are you switching roles? Are you like Charlie Brown? You are so fearful that you want to engage, but sometimes you don't dare. But when you finally do, it's really angry or reactive. And it just confirms for you that when you do say something, it makes things worse. So it's really about the process that you're in, and how can I help you be your process consultant and have a new experience so that you can see that the other person gets it and cares, and it will help you feel soothed and ready and willing to trust again.
I think any of the behaviors that we develop, it's not, bad or evil or negative, or you're not trying to find the bad guy or any of that kind of stuff. It really is looking at the process itself. And I think sometimes we have to step away from the situation and get a perspective. Just like when you climb a mountain, you can see the valley, but if you're in the bottom of the valley, all you see are the trees around you. And so a lot of times the process of therapy or treatment is to take a few steps back, to not so much get stuck in the content, just like Troy is saying, but to be able to see that what is the process, what is actually happening. And that way you de-villainize any individual, and you're really looking, the issue is the process and the pattern. And when we develop patterns, all behavior is purposeful. We developed those patterns because that was the best we could do with the information we had and the skills that we had at that point in our lives. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're just doing the best you can with what you got. But when you get a little bit further down the road and you have a chance to be able to, work with a process consultant, like Troy's talking about, and be able to actually get a chance to understand the process, then you're in a better place to be able to make choices and be able to change that process. And if you can do that with the partner, with the person that you're having those conflicts with, then you can both see each other's patterns and how those things interact with each other, and how you can be able to make some changes to make a difference.
Yeah.
They don't get stuck in those cycles.
Yeah. I also like some of these other questions, like question 3 and question 4 from Dr. Woolley's assessment, because our a lot of our first experiences. So as a child, our first experiences, but also in romantic relationships, a lot of our first experiences sort of set a map. And I guess that's part of the value of some of these answers. Like, when were you most likely to be comforted? And how did you let these people know that you needed a connection or you needed to be comforted? The way that they did that and the way that you did that has probably become something of a map for you. You may not even know that, but it's what you expect from maybe someone in a new relationship that they may not be aware of, or maybe just how you start to seek and feel connection through people that may be unique to your family.
And seeking comfort is always risky. I think one of the hallmarks of a secure attachment is when you can reach out and ask for connection and ask for comfort. Because most of us, we have a tendency to operate from the standpoint of read my mind, know that I'm sad. How you've always heard the classic thing of, honey, why won't you talk to me? And, well, if you don't know, then I'm not going to tell you, kind of a thing. You got to figure this out yourself. But no one really can, because no one really is a mind reader. But to reach out, and we call it in the actual process of the therapy that we do is making a reach, is to be able to ask for that help. And one of the things that we do a lot of times with the clients that we work with is to teach them how to ask for what they need, to be able to self-advocate for their needs, and to not be ashamed when they're doing that. Because a lot of times that seems to come, don't you think, that it comes with shame, don't you think, Troy?
Yeah.
Ask for something.
Yeah. I was thinking what you said about that mind reading. I grew up in Seattle, and one of my favorite comic strips, I delivered the paper as a boy. And one of my favorite comic strips is called Shermans Lagoon. And I think it's somewhat regional of a comic strip, but it's about sea life. And then there's a shark. They're married, and she's ignoring him, and he says, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." And there's a couple of panels where he has to go through, like, was it about something that I did? Is it something I said? Is it something that I should have known that I said, that I did, that I should have known better not to have done? Something like that. And she went, "Humph," and he went, "Oh." But I do think that shame is a big part. I think most negative feelings, but shame in particular, is one of the things that drives these patterns a lot. Because shame, I think, is at the root of being anxious about losing attachment to other people.
And somehow we see it as a weakness to need connection and comfort and attachment. And yet it's a core human need. I think one of the things that's hard, it's maybe not, it's difficult in our culture, is that we tend to, at least outwardly, value independence. Be an independent person, take care of yourself, go do this thing, you don't need anybody. And that's such a fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
We're missing some of the most important elements of community and connection by taking that kind of a view of how you determine an effective or competent adult.
Yeah.
So we have a hard time asking for the connection that we all need, and we're hardwired for needing.
Yeah. But I think part of what you're asking too, Maddy, is that 7th question is, how did you learn that people were unsafe?
Right.
And then, so we're all trying to cope the best way we know how. And that's question 8. Is like, have we ever turned to alcohol, to drugs, sex, or even other material things. I don't know if Dr. Woolley meant this, but even like watching Netflix and binging, or food. What are the type of things that we did to cope when those needs were not being met? And then he has a couple of other questions, particularly for helping us understand our attachment to romantic relationships. Because as we get older, our primary attachments may not be always our parents and start to become more our partners. And talking about times that we've been vulnerable and finding comfort with our partners, and what type of traumatic instances have we had in previous romantic relationships. I heard someone once say, and I don't forgot who it was, so I would give credit, is that most of our attachment patterns come from two places, or two sources. It might have been Dr. Jim Thomas. Two sources. He said that they come from our family of origin and the relationship that we're currently in. And I think that for those who've also had really traumatic experiences, like often happens in divorce or other abusive relationships, that those two are probably places where these patterns can really take root. How have you tried to find comfort in romantic relationships? And then, sorry, this fourth one, I forgot to remove that. That was something else I created earlier. As Maddy and I were going through this, I was thinking about these questions and how that they help us look at and explore ways that our attachment needs have been met or have been unmet. And I believe this came from Dr. Dan Siegel. I was going to put a reference there too. This is Dr. Siegel. I think the 4 S's of a secure attachment, of how as we as parents or as a loved one can help foster a secure attachment in our children and our spouses and those that we love. And he says that there's 4 things. First is that they need to be seen. There's a lot of power in knowing that my hurt, my pain, my opinion, my accomplishments, the things that I value can be seen by this person that I'm putting all my trust in. The second is that they need to feel safe. A lot of times we are in relationships where we mostly feel safe or we halfway feel safe, but there's things that we may not say. There may just be a few things that we hold back, and it's because we're afraid that if we say them, that the other person may react and it will cost us our relationship. To really have a fully secure relationship, I think we need to feel safe to be able to explore anything.
Yeah, like how they say that you can tell it's a real friend if they'll tell you you've got a hair in your tooth, or papers undone, or whatever. The idea that they can tell you the things that you're doing or a way that you're operating that's causing difficulties, and they feel safe enough, and you feel safe enough hearing it from them, that you're not going to be devastated by that feedback, and that creates a safe basis to operate from, so that you can get the truth and feedback and feel safe in that process, and do the same thing. You can say the same thing to them, when there are things that are hard that you need to say.
Yeah. The third is to feel soothed. With this person, life is hard and it is unfair, and we get bumps and we get bruises along the way, and we need somewhere to turn to put salve on those hurts, help us feel better, give us comfort, and give us comfort by having a connection, not just like seeking out things like food or drugs or mindless watching of TV. And for a lot of people, sex. Being able to find soothing in a relationship that is solid.
I think it's just I just picture that as a big old hug. You
Mm-hmm.
know, when my daughters got older, we spent quite a bit of time when they were younger rocking them in a rocking chair. And they got bigger, it was pretty hard to do that in a rocking chair. And so we actually bought a love seat rocker that was a two-seater
Mm-hmm.
rocker. And so even as a teenager or even as adults, if they were having a really bad day, you could just gather them up, put your arm around them, and just rock for a little while
Mm-hmm.
together. Let them cry and just be there for them. I think soothing is really sitting with the person you care about in their pain, not trying to take it away, not trying to make it go away, but just to be there with them so they're not by themselves in that pain.
And then to feel secure. Every relationship has conflict. I think there's this myth that good relationships don't. The truth is that people in good relationships and bad relationships have the same amount of conflict. The difference is how quickly they resolve it. And as the fourth one, secure, that when the conversation's over, they leave the conversation feeling secure about the relationship. They're not questioning it. They're not thinking that everything's over or that things have been ruined. They're not thinking about it constantly after they're done talking, like replaying it in their minds. They can leave the conversation feeling like the person loves them just as much.
And it's those secure, the feelings of security that allow us to be able to really become who we are and to be able to reach out and to try new things and to risk with person, but risk outside of the relationship too, and gives us an opportunity to really expand our identity,
Mm-hmm.
our talents, our desires, our dreams, all of those kinds of things. It serves as a foundation for being able to really become who we can become. That's why it's so essential.
Well, this will be at least a two-part video series. We'll end here, but I encourage you to look back on this and identify your own history, your needs that have been met, your needs that have not been met, and how that influences your attachment style. And next time we'll talk about, particularly between a parent and a child, how that dynamic between you and them, being influenced by your attachment style, can develop into a pattern.
That's right.
Thank
Sounds,
you.
yeah.